Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gresham-Barlow School District's Budget Forum. We're so glad that you are here. I'm Communications Director Athena Vadnais, and we're going to start the presentation in just a moment. But to get things started, Communications Specialist Kenya Osorio will interpret our introductory remarks. Kenya?
Bienvenidos al foro virtual del presupuesto del Distrito Escolar de Gresham-Barlow. Soy Athena Vadnais, directora de comunicaciones. Nos alegra que nos acompañen. Para comenzar, la especialista en comunicaciones, Kenia Osorio, interpretará nuestros comentarios introductorios.
Before I turn the presentation over to Superintendent Klinger, introductions are in order. Serving as panelists for tonight's presentation, Pete Bejarano, the district's financial director, Sarah DeBoy, the assistant superintendent of the district, Michael Squeaton, executive director of human resources, Araceli Arredondo, who will be our interpreter, and of course, Superintendent Klinger. And for those of you who want to use the interpretation feature, please click on the interpretation globe that's at the bottom of the screen and click Spanish because that's where we're offering interpretation tonight.
Antes de continuar con la superintendente Klinger, haremos las presentaciones correspondientes. Como panelistas de la presentación de esta noche nos acompañan Pete Bejarano, director de finanzas del distrito, Sarah DeBoy, subsuperintendente adjunta, Michael Sweeten, director ejecutivo de recursos humanos, Araceli Arredondo, nuestra intérprete, y por supuesto la superintendente Tracy Klinger. Para las personas que nos acompañan y necesitan interpretación en español, hagan clic en el símbolo del globo de interpretación en los controles de la reunión y seleccione español.
Okay, and so now I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Klinger.
Y ahora continuamos con la superintendente Klinger.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, we're going to provide you with an overview of our budget and some of the financial hurdles and challenges that we are facing as a school district. We will provide an opportunity to answer your questions, and then you'll have an opportunity to participate in a survey. Your feedback is important to us as we engage in this process, and we're really glad that you're here. Let me take a moment to turn things over to Pete Bejarano, our Director of Finance. He will share some important information about school district budgets and expenses.
Thank you, Dr. Klinger. So I want to start by doing a brief overview about the basics of budget and budget law. And for those of you unfamiliar with how budget law works for governments, basically in the state of Oregon, we're required as a government entity every year to anticipate our revenue and then plan our expense to match that equally so that our revenues exactly match our expenditures so that we spend within our means. The general fund is the fund that we're going to be focusing on for the presentation tonight because that's the one that we have control over. We do have a debt service fund, we do have a capital projects fund, but those are very restricted into how we can use them by various laws and covenants. Anyway, general fund revenue, the majority comes from the state, specifically a formula called SSF, State School Fund, and we'll be talking about that a bit more in some extra slides. And the general fund expenses, the majority goes to staffing. And again, I'll be diving into that more as we progress through these slides. So the general fund money comes from three distinct sources. We already talked about that the majority comes from the state, from that state school fund. 22% comes from local sources, and that's mostly property tax, local property tax that those of us within the Gresham area are paying. And then 8% comes from other sources. This is a variety of things. One of the larger sources there is unrestricted grants. Those are grants with no strings attached that we can spend as we see fit. For those of you who aren't aware, most grants come with a variety of strings attached. We can only spend them on very specific things, so they get accounted for elsewhere. So, where does the money go? The general fund budget takes that revenue and spends it in a couple different places. The majority, almost 70%, goes specifically to people. It's the teachers, it's the staff who are supporting the students and supporting our schools. The next largest chunk, that 22%, is for purchase services. And that's a little bit of a confusing term because really we're purchasing services, but we're paying people because we're paying contracts with our transportation department, we're paying our charter schools. So these are positions, these are people that we're paying as well. These are our bus drivers. These are our charter school teachers and administrators and support staff. These are our nutrition services staff. These are after school program staff. So as you can see, those two blue pieces of the pie is a vast majority of our expenses. The remainder is just 11%. And of that, the largest percentage in green there, that's the revenues. Or sorry, that's the reserves. That's 7%. So the reserves is two things. That's our ending fund balance and our contingency. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a second. But those other small ones, either 1 or 2%, that's materials, supplies, and capital purchases, as well as transfers. And I apologize that my slide is covered. Oh, well. Let's move on to the next slide here. So for budget basics, we want to talk a little bit about what that reserve section, that 7% was. Reserves is made up mostly of ending fund balance. And ending fund balance functions for the district like a savings account. And it's there really to be used mostly for emergencies and as reserves. And two recent examples that we've actually used ending fund balance would be one, to maintain normal operations, to keep the lights on, to keep the payroll checks going out to teachers and staff when the government shutdowns have stopped flows of federal grants. Also, we've used ending fund balance mid-year to pay for repairs from weather damage before emergency funding was made availability or before that there were insurance claim monies coming back in. So the district's financial reserves have been used over the past 4 years, as you can see on this chart here, to continue to even out that budget and pay for expenses. But as we've been doing that over time, our ending fund balance has been dwindling. And as you can see, for 25-26, the end of the current fiscal year that we're in right now, we are projected to be at 10.2 million, and that's below a very important threshold. We have board policy, and the board has decided that our ending fund balance should be at least 8% of our operating budget. But that projected dollar amount, that 10.2 million, that puts us below that 8% threshold. So we can't dip into reserves to keep balancing the budget, and that's part of why we're here today. So there's a number of factors that are impacting next year's budget. We have rising costs, we have declining enrollment, and we have some uncertainty with state and federal dollar flows. So I'll talk about those in some detail, and I'll start with rising costs. Basically, the state school fund, that main revenue source, is increasing every year, but it's increasing at about 3 to 4%, whereas many of these costs are increasing much more than that. So payroll costs are just a little bit above 4%. So we're already having a widening gap over time there. But where things really start to get serious is with PERS costs. Our PERS costs are increasing much, much more than that 4%. It's closer to 10%, actually. The utility costs are another major factor for us. I think everybody who's attending this call, if you have to pay your electric bill, you may have been paying attention to this, that electricity rates across the area and even over the nation are increasing pretty drastically. We are seeing 8, 9% increases in utility costs. And then our insurance costs for the district, and we pool our insurance, by the way, with other districts throughout the state, they're going up 12% just in 1 year. So these four areas are all outpacing our revenues and causing some of that difference that we have to equalize with our budget. And then I'll talk about those other two a bit more. So let's talk a bit more about PERS. PERS is the Public Employee Retirement System. It's basically a state-run retirement account. And as a retirement account, it's investments, just the same as like a 401k would be, but it's investments in specific stocks and specific bonds that are chosen by the state through the PERS board. And it's also influenced by statewide numbers, statewide enrollment, not specific to the district, but across Oregon, and statewide actuarial, aka demographic data. So all four of these things that I'm talking about here, they're outside of the district control. They're either set by the legislature through the PERS board, or they're at the whim of the markets. So we don't have hardly any control over those PERS costs. And here's a summary of what's been happening with them just last year. So you can see in the previous biennium from 23 to 25, we had one set of rates. And for the 25-27 biennium, they jumped up on average a little more than 8% in 1 year. So that's double the rate of inflation. Pretty substantial hit for us. And if we look at next year, we have some projected rates. These rates have not yet been finalized by the PERS board, but these are official releases from the state, from the PERS office. And in the next biennium, it's another jump of about 10%. So these are major systemic and long-term increases to our PERS rates that are putting some significant strain on our ability to balance a budget. You add to this that we have steady decreases in enrollment. You can see on the left of that chart here, that's the past 10 years of enrollment for the district, and that includes our charter schools. And over the next 10 years, it's expected to be a similar line. So steady decreases in enrollment, and that's not unique to the district. That is statewide. We are seeing steady decreases in enrollment throughout the state. And fewer students means less funding overall. The SSF formula, that state school fund formula set by the legislature, it's a fairly complex set of statistics that actually drive it. But one of the main factors is enrollment. So as it decreases, our revenue decreases as well. But what's interesting is that if you compare us to our neighboring districts, David Douglas, Reynolds, Centennial, we're actually doing pretty well in comparison. But as you can see, we're all in the same boat. We're all experiencing declining enrollment. And this is not a 1 year or a 2 year phenomenon. This is sustained. So getting back to that uncertain state and federal funding, you may have been hearing in the news about this, but the changes because of a major law that was passed recently called HR 1 that affects the way that federal taxes work, because federal taxes in the state of Oregon affect state taxes as well, the state of Oregon experienced a pretty major shortfall. And in the past, they were predicting that it was maybe going to be 800 million or 750 million. Now they're thinking it's more like 500 million, but still, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. And so the governor's office reached out to every single agency in the state, Department of Forestry, Department of Energy, fire departments, and us as well, and saying, hey, we need everyone, every department to submit a list of cuts because we're not sure that we can balance the budget as a state. So Oregon Department of Education submitted their proposals, and we're currently waiting to hear what the state legislature is going to do with those proposals. They're reviewing them right now, and the short legislative session, which is scheduled to be over at the beginning of next month, if I remember correctly. So we're waiting to hear what the legislature is going to do about that, but we are expecting to not see any major changes, but that exact number of how big that budget hole is that needs to be filled is a little bit unknown. And we go over to the federal side of things. We did get some good news here recently, and that's that the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House both agreed on a federal funding package for the future that keeps intact many of the federal grants that we had heard some rumors were maybe going to be going away. So the good news is things like Title I and Title III, those grants are remaining intact, but unfortunately, they are being flat funded. And what that means is that basically we're getting the same dollar amount that we were from year to year, but our payroll costs are going up, both our wages and our PERS and our insurance and everything else. So even though we're seeing quote unquote steady or flat funding, what that realistically means is a decrease because our payroll costs are going up. Now, in addition to this, the unfortunate thing about federal grants is we've seen in the recent iteration of the news and what's been going on with the different branches kind of having some disagreements. The executive branch can hold and has held various funds that have been appropriated by the legislative branch. So just because Congress has said, here's the money, the executive branch is maybe holding on to it for a little bit. So it's a little less certain than it used to be for us to depend on that federal dollars. and to anticipate when exactly they're going to be arriving. So that's another factor for us to deal with as well. So the size of the reductions. Gresham-Barlow School District anticipates that we're going to need to do reductions somewhere in the range of 7.5 million to 13 million. And that's on top of reductions that we're doing in this current school year of about 8 million in reductions. And those have been to materials, to services, and to some temporary staff as well. So over just these 2-year periods, this year and the next year that we're budgeting for right now, we're talking about cuts between 15 and 21 million dollars, which is very substantial. It's approximately 6% of our overall general fund budget.
Thank you, Pete. As we go through all of this information, you might be wondering about the process that we use for determining our reduction plans. So when we're called to make these major budgetary decisions, we start by developing guiding principles to help move us through a decision-making process. So some of these principles are driven by the numbers, so those are financial principles. Others are driven by a process, and we'll take a look at these in just a minute. But we also use a questioning technique that helps support us in considering a variety of factors, including impacts on students, on safety, on requirements, and you'll see those in just a moment as well. One of our priorities as we started this process was to develop financial and non-financial guiding principles, and these were drafted in the fall. So in November, they were shared with our school board, our budget committee, and labor groups for feedback. These principles have been important as we've begun looking into scenarios. So take just a moment to review them. They work to support the strong financial footing that we have maintained as a district for a very long time. I'll give you just a moment to read those. I'm going to keep moving through the presentation, but these are available on our website as well. So as a part of this work, we've been committed to communication. We've been working on regular updates, on an updated webpage, on FAQs, and other resources to help inform and educate our community. We do have a decision-making tool that we're using in this process, and you'll see that next. We also know that anytime there are reductions in staff or programs, that staff, students, and families are impacted, and we are committed to handling these tough conversations with openness and care. It's one of our key priorities in these guiding principles. So as we work through the potential reductions, these questions that you see on your screen will be used to evaluate and help prioritize each reduction that is being considered. So the first one, is this a requirement? We have many requirements through statute, policy, and from the Oregon Department of Education that must be considered. The second one, we've been doing a lot of important work around key instructional priorities to improve our outcomes for students, and these have been a real focus. So this work will need to continue as we work to improve student outcomes. Number 3, in some cases, we can reduce something and it might slow down the work. In other cases, any reduction make it necessary to just completely eliminate whatever that program or opportunity might be. The fourth one, many people are concerned about how reductions might impact student and staff safety. This is where those considerations come into play. But we also have legal and operational requirements and responsibilities that must be met. Number 5, this is really a question about who may be most impacted by a decision. So as an example, historically in our district, students with disabilities or with IEPs and students learning English have had lower outcomes in our district. These impacts get discussed here as we make programmatic decisions. And the 6th one, this is why you are here. Your feedback will be incorporated into the process through this question number 6. We will utilize what we are hearing from students, from staff, and our community, and we will include the information from last week's budget forum, this webinar, and from the district-wide survey that's open right now. When we look at the budget development process, it's important to know that we are still in the early stages, but things will start to move very quickly in the next 2 months. So, phase one, during the fall and winter, I work alongside district staff to prepare a proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And we do a lot of engagement work with our community, which is what we're doing right now. At the conclusion of this process, I submit a proposed budget to the district's budget committee. Phase two, the budget committee, made up of the school board and members of the community, review and discuss the proposed budget and hear public comments. The budget committee approves the budget and submits it to the school board. The last phase, phase three, once the budget is approved by the budget committee, it is forwarded to the school board. And prior to adopting the budget, the school board holds a public hearing. The school board must legally adopt a budget by June 30th. It's now time for your questions. Gresham-Barlow Communications Director Athena Vadnais will be our facilitator. Athena?
Hello, everyone. We're really looking forward to hearing what your questions are. To share a question, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the toolbar, enter your question when the window appears, and then click Send to submit it. And to start things off, while we wait for people to enter their questions, one of the questions that we get a lot is regarding student enrollment. I know that Pete said that declining enrollment for our district is predicted, but there's a lot of developments around the district, houses going up, apartments going up, and I'm wondering, does that mean that we could actually have increasing enrollment? Pete or Tracy?
I'm happy to take a stab at this, and then I'd appreciate Tracy chiming in.
Sure.
These are national, in fact, these are international trends. And so while housing developments and housing opportunities become available, generally the families, the folks that are moving in simply have less kids than they did. So that's number one. And then number two, housing affordability is a major issue all throughout the United States. And so many of the new houses that come on the market, even though they are quote unquote affordable, are still out of the price range of many of the families that we serve. And so there are multiple barriers to finding students who want to enroll or who have the ability to enroll in public schools. And yeah, this is a statewide, this is a nationwide issue. We're also seeing that there are a number of other factors. Tracy, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would add is last spring and into this fall, the district went through a long range facilities planning process. So that included our school board, members of the community, and we hire a facilitator that uses their expertise to gather data for us and help us really evaluate the how full our schools are and really help us evaluate the different building permits and the different processes that might be going on in the city to help us know the trends with our enrollment. And so looking at that process has really let us know that we are going to continue to see a downward trend in our enrollment based on their projections as well.
Okay, we have another question. Is the district open to furlough days as a way to save money?
Some of our neighboring districts have been talking about using furlough days. One of the challenges with furlough days is they become a short-term solution. And as Pete was sharing the PERS information, we don't have a short-term problem, we have a long-term problem. So in the short term, furlough days are not going to be a solution that's sustainable for us as a district and will not be something that we can maintain over time.
Okay, our next question. How might the decisions made by the legislature impact the scale of reductions needed? For instance, if the state taps the stability fund to avoid the 5% reduction scenario.
So that's what we're hoping for. The legislature is the decider in how much impact we have from the state funding sources. So in the second year of the biennium, which next year will be, we go into that year anticipating and knowing what our allocation from the state will be. With some of the different things that have happened this fall in terms of HR1, that law that Pete was talking about, but also some of the impacts to state revenue, we are dependent on the state to have some solutions and to make some decisions around how we move forward. So the impact to us could be a couple of $1 million. Utilizing the state stability fund is one of the areas of advocacy that many districts are kind of working through with the legislature and talking to local electeds. And so that's part of what we're hoping for is that K-12 education is held harmless in this educational or in this legislative session so that we can move forward with what we're anticipating for budget there.
Okay, we have a question about the Center for Advanced Learning. This individual says it's a critical program that gives everyone the chance at advanced learning and long-term skills. Will we continue to fund the Center for Advanced Learning?
So Cal is a charter school, and Cal is currently going through a charter renewal process. I think it was either December or January that our board approved continuing the charter with them. And right now we're in a contract negotiation process.
Okay, next question. What is the timeline for notifying staff of layoffs or assignment changes?
Yeah,
I'll take
that's, I
that
think,
question.
okay. Thanks,
You want me
Michael.
to take that? Sure, no problem. Yeah, so our hope right now is we're working with GBEA to make sure that we have the seniority lists and everyone's endorsements, and we look at what criteria that is that the seniority lists are based off of. Then we will look at different scenarios. We're working with the admin group. Tracy takes that feedback to look at what the different school scenarios are. We do need to wait for the state a little bit more to have a more solid understanding of what those vacancies will look like. Our regular timeline to notify temporary employees will be March 15th. And then our intent to, if people are going to return, we give a window between March 15th and April 15th. So we hope in April to be able to look at whatever movement is possible, fill those open positions, and then if people need to be adjusted, those would be our goal is to let people know by the end of April, beginning of May. That is our personal goal. There are some factors in there that could change that timeline, but we're working closely with our union groups to make sure that everyone has a common understanding and that we go by our CBAs.
Thank you, Michael. This next question comes from a teacher. This person says many teachers are surprised to hear that enrollment numbers are down. They feel like they have high class sizes. Are there certain schools where we see this more than at other schools?
I would say overall, enrollment does vary by building. We do have some schools that are filling up and bursting at the seams, and we have some schools that are at like 50 to 60% capacity. And so one of the things that we've worked to do over the last several years is to start to adjust some of our staffing to our enrollment. So some of the reductions that we utilized last year were a part of that. We had temporary teachers in classrooms and we didn't refill those positions as an example, which has led to some higher class sizes. But enrollment trends are certainly down, as you saw in the chart.
Okay, now we have a question regarding special education, especially specifically caseloads and understaffing. Can we expect these problems to persist or worsen in the coming budget cycle, or are these areas a priority due to equity concerns?
So, as I shared with our list of questions, considering the needs of our students with disabilities is one of our principles. I can't promise that there won't be some reductions to special education staffing, but it is something that we're looking really carefully at. One of the unique things that we're experiencing is although our overall student enrollment is growing over time, or sorry, is declining over time, the number of students that are experiencing disability or students that are learning English as a second language, the numbers of those groups of students are growing. So, another layer to that is that the needs of just our students with mental health and other things have changed. So, we're in a different position really than we were just 5, 8 years ago in terms of what's happening with the demographics and the needs of our students.
Okay, here's one. Is the district open to considering a 4-day school week?
So that's a question that we've been asked, and some of that conversation was a part of some of our contract negotiations. And when you look at the research around 4-day weeks, it predominantly says that it's not great for students. And so that is something that we really took to heart and as a part of those conversations. The other thing about a 4-day school week is we still have staff 5 days. So we might have some staff that are not there that fifth day of the week, but there are staff that would still be working. And with staff being the primary driver of our costs and expenses, it's really not the savings that it seems like it might be. But it has been a part of a conversation.
Okay, next question. Will the district work with employee unions to find creative solutions to avoid or reduce layoffs?
So we have met with our union partners a couple of times already and had conversations with them. The primary resource that we're using for our feedback is our survey. So although we're having conversations and really working through the process with our labor partners, it really is our survey that's driving our decision making. I will add on the survey, there is a box. There is an open-ended space where people can put feedback. So people do have the opportunity to share with us whatever great ideas they might have.
All right, another enrollment question. If some schools have lower than normal enrollment, has the district thought of closing those schools and combining students' staff to another site?
So that's something we're seeing in a number of districts across the state. Many districts, because of the enrollment challenges, are really taking a look at that. Gresham-Barlow's in a little bit different space at this moment because we closed West Gresham during the pandemic. And just before that, we consolidated Damascus Middle School and our Deep Creek Elementary into a K-8. So in the last 6 to 8 years, we have closed and consolidated 2 schools. That doesn't mean that that won't be something that we need to consider as we move forward. It's not something that we're considering for next year.
Here's a question related to staffing. Will any type of early retirement be offered?
The short answer is no. That is not part of the plans that we've made.
In developing next year's budget, an individual asks, do you look at past year's budgets for decision making for current year issues and compare the numbers?
We have looked at a lot of data. Some of that has been different trends with different populations of students. Some of that has been staffing levels across time by level. So elementary school staffing, middle school staffing, high school staffing. We've also taken a look at some of the strategies that have been used in previous reduction years. So back in the 2008, 2009, and a few years after that, we had some significant reductions in our district. So we have taken a look at some of those choices that were made at that time and evaluated things that may have worked from back then that might be a great idea, other things that we wouldn't do again, but that has factored into our decision making.
All
And I'll
right.
just add
Yes, go ahead, Pete.
I'll just add to that that the standard budget process, even outside of this, more unique situation that we're in this year, is to look closely at the last few years of actual data, as well as the last few years of budgeted data, as well as previous audited financial statements, and consider those multiple streams of data to figure out the most realistic trends that we can track as to which expenses are moving in which direction. So that is a standard protocol.
Okay. Here's a question related to materials and supplies. Are there curriculum costs that can be reduced, i.e., curriculum items that consistently do not get sufficiently used? Or are there better options or strategies to use?
Yeah, as we are working through various curriculum adoption processes, we do look at where we can have some cost savings. We do have curriculum standards that we are required to teach. And so we do need materials in the hands of our staff to be able to do that. But that is an area that we look at. Historically, we haven't been able to purchase curriculum for the full district all in one year. So we might do just elementary reading materials or the next year, middle and high school. So there's some different strategies that we've utilized in the past that we will likely be leaning back into. Curriculum is very expensive. One of the unique challenges with just kind of time and how education has changed is many resources are virtual now or some kind of electronic support or subscription, and those expire. So there used to be days where we could have a textbook and we could use them 10, 12, 15 years, which might not be a great idea, but we've done it. But when you're talking about electronic resources, you do have to renew subscriptions and look at what is available to staff.
Okay. I know that in a lot of the district's messages to the community, there has been information regarding every department, every school will face budget reductions due to the size and scope of the budget challenge that we face. We have someone who's wondering what cuts at the district level are being considered.
The district level reductions are not something that we're ready to share publicly and are still part of the conversation. In the survey that we're having people complete, there are some district prioritization questions in terms of the various kinds of supports that we provide to our schools, but there are district level reductions that are a part of this. I will also add that our district level a greater percent of district level reductions took place last year leading into this year's budget. And so that has already been a place that we've experienced some reductions.
All right, next question. With the district needing to reduce costs, how are you distinguishing between non-negotiable expenses and discretionary initiatives during this process review? And given ongoing safety and maintenance challenges with facilities, is the district open to structured volunteer or community partnership programs to reduce maintenance costs?
Can we break that down into a couple of smaller questions?
Okay, so first part of the question, how are you distinguishing between non-negotiable expenses and discretionary initiatives during the priority review?
So, going back to those questions that I shared, that really leads us through that process. As a part of our reductions going into this year, we did reduce some of our discretionary spending. Some other areas that we've really worked really hard to reduce some of our costs are around additions to time work, or as staff know, ATTW. That is when we have staff that might be doing extra duties outside of their regular day, and it gets really expensive. And so we've really been mindful to do the things we absolutely have to do in terms of safety or programmatically or something that might be grant funded. But we also are really trying to hold a tighter line in terms of saving some money there, and that's millions of dollars. The other thing we're really working on is trying to manage our substitute costs a little bit. Our staff has done an amazing job showing up for work. And so we, of course, need staff to be able to be out when they need to be out, but reducing substitute costs is another thing that we're really working on in terms of some of those extra expenses that we have.
Okay, the second part of the question. Given ongoing safety and maintenance challenges with facilities and fields, is the district open to structured volunteer or community partnership programs to reduce maintenance costs?
We've utilized resources like partnerships that way in the past, and some of that has continued and some of it has kind of fallen off over the last several years. So that is, I think, something that we would be open to.
Okay. How is the online survey being distributed? I can answer that. We're sending it out to all staff and all families. For families, we're sending out through Parent Square, our favorite communication device. And then we have it on the district website, the budget development webpage, and it's available for any parents, any students, any community members to take the survey. We encourage, if you're watching tonight and you know some friends or colleagues that need to take the survey, please give them a little nudge because we want to get as much feedback as possible as we're putting together the budget. And the survey will close on February 17th. So we have about a week left as far as the survey goes. Okay. Is the district considering reducing contracts with outside partners as a cost savings measure?
Many of our outside partners are providing a service to us that we don't pay for. So there is no cost savings there. Some of our other partnerships that might be for alternative programming and some of those sorts of things, we have looked at ways that we can streamline some of those expenses. And so that was part of the reductions that we were able to do going into this year that didn't impact additional staff reductions. So that's part of the work that we've done. We've also done a deep dive into evaluating a number of tech services and subscriptions and various things to reduce any additional expenses that we can.
Okay. Will the district be prioritizing protecting mental health services, knowing that ongoing events locally and nationally make access to service critical?
That is one of the priorities that, does come up as we look at our evaluation tools. That doesn't mean that there won't be reductions. I think one of the challenges that we're facing is some of the partners that we get services through are also facing some of these financial challenges. So, for example, we have mental health providers that work in our district from Multnomah County. And depending on how things are going with their budgets, there are some things that can also be out of our control in terms of reductions from other agencies. There's also challenges with access and just keeping some of the positions we currently have filled when we're talking about therapists and things. But we are monitoring and really paying attention to the mental health needs of our students as well.
Okay, we have a question on the high school level. This individual says high schools have been told that forecasting will happen later this year once the budget is clearer. Is there a timeline for that to begin?
John or Sarah, do you want to take that one?
I'll start, and Sarah, you can back me up. We are moving forward with forecasting as is. We're meeting that timeline because we can't let that delay. We can't delay that process for this budget conversation. We need that information. So right now we're status quo and moving forward with forecasting.
Okay, here is an HR question, so be ready, Michael. Does the district anticipate being able to manage a portion, and how substantial of a portion, of the reductions through attrition and temporary positions?
Yes. No. Yes, so every year we do have systems that people retire mid-year. We do have openings. Some people retire and work back. So those positions will be open. We will, depending on the need of bumping and transferring people, we will fill those first, of course, before we do anything else. So yes, we do have temporary employees and we do have people um, sending in their retirements. I just got two of those actually today. So if you do have those, send those to me as soon as you can. That would be very helpful. And your colleagues would appreciate that too.
Okay. A question regarding Medicaid. Can the district take better use of billing Medicaid?
I can tackle this a little bit. We actually work pretty extensively with the Multnomah Education Service District, MESD, and one of their specialties is assisting districts through the very complex legal challenges of Medicaid and providing Medicaid services. And we do work with them extensively to make sure that we are maximizing every dollar. But unfortunately, one of the many ways that that HR 1 bill that I was talking about, in fact, impacts the entire nation is changes to Medicaid that are designed to cut costs across the entire nation. So that has an effect on us as well.
Okay, here's a special education question. What is the district doing to make sure the special education budget is sufficient since the population of students with higher needs continues to increase?
We're looking at all of our programs really carefully to see what we can do. We know that special ed is an area of challenge for our district, and that we believe we could use more supports, and sadly, that's not what we get. We tend to get flat funding from the federal government in terms of what's available for us. And as Pete so eloquently described earlier, as staffing costs go up, the same amount of funds don't keep up with the costs of our staff. The other challenge I just want to take a moment to highlight related to special education is that we do get additional money for special education up to 11% of our student population. The challenge that we have as a district is our special ed population is over 15%. So that means that additional 4% of students that are eligible or would bring additional funds to support their needs to the district goes unfunded and comes out of other funds that we have. That is something that has been highlighted with the legislators, and that has been a priority in terms of advocacy, because just that 4% difference is millions of dollars to our district. So there's a couple of funding challenges around special education that really could help us if there's some changes at the legislative level.
Okay. Here's the process question. When will the district publish the first draft of proposed reductions so the public can review and respond before decisions are finalized?
So we are really taking your feedback in this survey seriously. This is the opportunity to provide feedback. In terms of a list, it's a little bit different for a district our size. I know some people have seen that Portland Public has put out a list and other larger districts have put out a list. They're able to do that because of their size, and some of that then doesn't make positions identifiable. So in our district, because of our size, we don't want to put out a list of potential reductions that leaves an employee finding out through an announcement that way that their job might be on the line. So we're being more thoughtful in terms of how are we gathering the feedback up front? How are we using that in terms of our decision making? And how are we being strategic in terms of timely notice and appropriate notice to our staff so that we can take care of them in this process as well?
All right, here's one related to advocacy. What would be most helpful for the district in community advocacy? And does the district foresee any reasons to feel hopeful, or is it all bad?
In terms of advocacy, I would say the short-term goal would be reaching out to your legislators to encourage them to use the Education Stability Fund. Is more than $1 billion in that fund. It's been used 9 times over the course of many years as it's been needed, most recently during COVID, I believe. And utilization of that funding would at least hold us stable in terms of state funding. We would still have reductions to make related to PERS and some of the cost implications that Pete was sharing. But in the short term, advocating for use of the Education Stability Fund is what I would recommend. Longer term, as we start to look ahead to next year, some of the issues that I was describing around special education in terms of lifting the cap or increasing the cap of funding, as well as how they reimburse us for high cost disability needs that we have in our district, those would be two really key areas of advocacy as we go into a longer legislative session next year. I don't remember the second half of the question.
Let's see. I believe they're wondering if there's any hope on the horizon.
You know,
Bright spots.
yeah. In terms of funding, no. It's concerning. We're in a difficult spot. But I think the hope comes from um, the way our community is already coming together to have conversations, to solve problems, to listen to various perspectives, to help us find the best path forward. Questions about volunteering or the way people have engaged with each other around this topic does give me hope because I believe as a community we can weather the storm. We're going to continue to do amazing things for our students. And I really do believe that we can get through this, but we do have some bumps ahead.
We have someone who wants to ask a question about English language learners. They share, how can we ensure that program isn't impacted since those students also get additional funding to go towards their needs? So how are we working to help English language learners?
So similar to the conversation around special education services, English language learners are another group of students that need additional supports. And so we have been doing a lot of professional development with our staff in order to better meet their needs, but we also have staff that support them directly. As Pete was talking about Title III and other things, there are some funding sources that have remained stable, and we're grateful for that as we move into the next year. But it is certainly a group that we're looking at how we support them.
Okay. This individual shares financial challenges are very common in several districts. Are district leaders looking outside of the district to partners or peers for successful stories, approaches, or creative ideas?
Yes, there are a number of different groups that are working together because we are not alone in this process or in this circumstance. There's a number of superintendents that are working together. Our business office officials are working together as well and working on strategies. Our human resources staff are doing the same thing, our communications departments. So there is a lot of collaboration with our neighbors in Multnomah County. But we also do a lot of work with the large districts in the state. Gresham-Barlow is the 10th largest district in the state, and we work with the other large districts to kind of look at resources they have, ideas they have, problem solving, and just look at a variety of things to see what great ideas we can borrow.
Okay. Here's a question related to the future of education. And I know we had a meeting with the community earlier today, and we were talking to some community members who have college students who are wanting to become teachers and are just counting down to when they can graduate and become a teacher in our school district. So this person is wondering, how do you retain quality staff, especially newer staff members, given the situation that we're dealing with right now?
I think we continue to support staff. It's amazing how our staff comes together in difficult times, and I think that's part of what new staff are looking for as a community. I think we're in for some rough times in education, and again, that's not about Gresham-Barlow. That is everywhere, honestly, around us, and so. Staffing and retention is a challenge, and the work is hard. Being a teacher and working in a school is emotionally, takes a lot of emotional work, a lot of heart work, we say, but also just physically demanding. And it is a lot of work.
Okay. This next person asks if we think we have creative ideas or ways to save money in some parts of the district costs, how can we best communicate these ideas?
Yeah, I think our next several slides kind of talk a little bit about the survey, but in the survey, you will be given the opportunity to rank order some different priorities by level. So for elementary schools, for middle schools, and for high schools, each separately, as well as district level work. And there is also a place where you can tell us anything else that you want us to know. So if you have an idea that you want us to consider, that is the best place to put it.
Okay. Here's a question that I know that you have received before. Is the district considering an operating levy?
So levies are tricky. Historically, Gresham as a district has not had a community base that has been supportive of a levy. And so, although that might be a conversation that our school board may have, I think there's some real challenges with that. We struggle to pass bonds. So, a school bond helps pay for facilities and buildings. A levy helps support staffing and people. And so, we have struggled even with school bonds in our district. And so a levy would be a real heavy lift. And I won't speak for the school board. They may have that conversation as we work through this. And I'll say, again, this is a long-term road that we're on. And so in the short term, we have some things to get our budget balanced for the coming year. And the work will need to continue. And so those conversations may continue over time.
Okay. In the interest of time, we're going to wrap things up. I do see some questions that we haven't had time to get to. If you want questions to those answers, you can email us at gbsd@gresham.k12.or.us. That's gbsd@gresham.k12.or.us. And that email address is also on our budget development webpage, which is on our website. So feel free to email that and we will get the answers to you. And so, Tracy, I will turn it back over to you for concluding this event.
All right. Let me get back here. So, thank you for your thoughtful questions. First of all, I hope that helped provide you with some additional information. So what's coming next? You can see here that there's a series of budget committee and school board meetings that are planned to take place over the course of the spring. Really, March and April is when the bulk of the work really happens. As these formal meetings are taking place, we'll be reviewing the feedback that we have received from these various engagements and from our surveys and be working to finalize our reductions list. So in addition to this webinar this evening, we also held an in-person budget forum last week, and you see the photos there on the slides. The same budget information was provided at that event, and the event was well attended, and there was a lot of productive conversation that took place. So we've had more opportunities to engage with the community. We also had a group activity for participants to learn from one another and to discuss their priorities. And these slides give you kind of a sense of what you'll see as you get into the survey. These groups were comprised of staff and families, which allowed each person to hear other perspectives and to work through a prioritization process. What you see here are slips of paper that were prioritized by level. So pink was elementary, green was middle school, yellow was high school, and the blue is for district office. Groups were asked to put the various colored slips into a priority ranking. And you can see just from these two examples that there are lots of differences in perspectives that are being captured through this process. So although we took photos of kind of the group work that took place, each person that was there also got to complete the survey so that they could provide their individual feedback. So as we develop the budget for next year, we want to know what you think should be prioritized. That's why you're here. The activity that I described on the previous slide is essentially what each of you will do when you complete the survey. There's also a place, as I have mentioned, for open-ended feedback or comments, questions, things that you would like us to know. And while the size of the budget reduction needed will impact every school and department, knowing what you value will guide our planning through the reduction process. I just want to wrap up tonight by sharing my deep appreciation for you all taking the time to come and be with us tonight. As a new superintendent, budget reductions were one of the last things that I would have wanted to do, but here we are. Please stay informed, share your thoughts with lawmakers, and participate in our online survey, which will be open through February 17th.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Please help us spread the word about what's happening in our district and how people can share their feedback with us. We appreciate you being here, and that will conclude our meeting. Have a great night, everyone.